Hello, and today we have another guest. And this one is going to absolutely blow your mind because it blew my mind. So I would like to welcome and introduce to you guys Mikael Luman. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you doing this morning?
Good.
Awesome.
Um, so, as some of you guys know, I've been on quite a journey through healing with food, and then now healing with energy work and prayer. And I was given the amazing gift from the universe to have Michael cross paths with me. And when I first started watching your videos, Michael, um, I I didn't understand, but I knew there was this knowing in me. I knew that something was happening that was beyond my eyes, that was beyond my understanding. Um, but I didn't know what was happening. So I would love for you to just tell people a little bit about your journey and what you would like for us to know that you do.
And I would say that it wasn't it wasn't, you understood it. You just, it was not in your thinking.
Mm,
Right? The
very
reason
true.
it resonated is because you knew that you knew it. It just was hard for you to grasp with your thinking, but not with your
Yeah.
knowing.
Well, and for me, I'm used to all the doing. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you have to do this and then do this and then do this. And then that happens.
Yeah.
And you were doing what I'm doing without the doing.
Yeah.
It was amazing
Because we're being.
because we're being.
All right. So my story, I and we'll start in 2015 and then I'll go back and add some more to it. But in 2015, I had just had a back surgery. I'd been in pain for 2.5 years, had the surgery, reherniated the same disc 3 weeks later. So I had an 8.5 millimeter protrusion in L4, L5 in my back, only to find out that I also had torn labrums and bilateral impingements in both hips. So in a moment of feeling as if I was out of options, like up to that point, I'd always had like a doctor's appointment to look forward to. Like if I could just make it 2 more weeks, or if I could just make it another month, or this is my appointment, or if I could just get insurance. Right? Because in the beginning I didn't actually have insurance, so I had to wait to get insurance, to get the MRI, to go to the doctor. Right. So like 2.5 years later, I have the surgery. I'm going through a divorce. I reherniate the same disc. And then the hip surgeon's like, okay, well, what I want you to do is do your back first, and then take 6 months to a year to get into shape, and then we can do your hips. And I was done. The back pain probably wasn't the worst of the pain. It was the hip pain that was referring groin pain, and it literally felt like I was getting kicked all day long.
Oh,
Right. So I left town. I hiked up to this river that we'd gone to as kids all the time. It's the Deschutes River in Oregon. I picked up a rock. I put all my pain in the rock and I threw the rock in the river and had an instant healing experience. Like one moment I had all these things, the next moment I didn't. The moment I let go of the rock was, though, the moment I realized the rock didn't take the pain. Right? The rock just allowed me to let it go. Part of my thinking was that I'm highly empathic. I operated very sympathically, let's say, for 40 years. So part of my thing was I was taking everybody's stuff because I wasn't happy with the way my life was going. So the rock just allowed me to kind of let it go as well without thinking it was going to go back to the people that I took it from.
mm,
Right. So I've had 7 right knee surgeries, 2 left knee surgeries, 2 broken ankles, a torn quad, 2 torn hamstrings, like all this stuff, where the doctors said oh, well, it's because of sports. So leading up to this, in about 2011 or 2012, I was like, this can't just be sports. There's got to be more to this than just sports, because there's plenty of people that play sports that don't injure themselves. And so that was kind of my first introduction into energy, but really physical. Like my chiropractor at the time had a thermal imaging camera, and he could show a correlation between organs and body parts, right? Like small intestine, front of the legs, large intestine, back of the legs, right? And so I started to see that there was more of an energetic, let's say, component to my lower leg injuries, right? Had I been a pitcher, it might have been my elbow, right? So it wasn't that sports injured me, but sports put me in a position for the disharmony to present itself.
Mm.
Right. So I injured myself. My first major injury was my junior year in high school. I broke my kneecap playing basketball. I had to have surgery. The doctor said I couldn't run for 6 months. I thought my life was over, because 6 months to a 16-year-old seems like the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's a whole season.
All I wanted to do was play sports. Right. So I started making some poor choices and started drinking and couldn't stop. And then I re-injured the same knee the next year, and then the next year. So pretty soon sports wasn't even an option anymore. But the choice to start drinking is the disharmony, let's say, that put me in a position to continue to injure myself. Mostly because of my perception of drinking, not necessarily the drinking itself. Right? I continued to create more disharmony by the choices that I was making. So I spent 10 years addicted to drugs and alcohol. I spent 2 years in prison. I've been clean for 21 years, right? But I still, even though I chose not to drink or to use and to help people in those positions, right? I still didn't understand like the energy or the energetic component to all of it, right? So that was in 2000, my healing experience was in 2015. Like at first I thought, oh, my purpose is to help addicts. Right. So in 2007, I quit a finance business that I owned. I wrote a book on my addiction. I went on a 12,000-mile bicycle ride around the United States to promote it. Right. But that never really worked out exactly the way that I had envisioned it to work out, because I still had all these things that I was holding on to. Right. So the moment I let go of that rock was the moment that I actually, for the first time, really saw my purpose. Right? My purpose was to be the example of possibility for people, but not by taking their stuff, by showing them that they don't need stuff. Right? The moment before my healing experience, when I looked back, I saw all the things in my life I wanted to change. Like, I wish I wasn't addicted to drugs. I wish I would have played college sports. I wish I could have gone to the Olympics. I wish I wasn't going through a divorce. Like all that stuff. The next moment, I didn't want to change anything because it all made sense.
Mm.
And really, healing is just a shift in perspective. Right? From broken and needing to be fixed to whole and complete and perfect and, all those words. Right. And any moment we can be any of those things that we choose to be. I chose to be broken because I didn't think I had any other options. The moment I let go of the rock was the moment I realized that I had all the options and that it's already happened. So in that moment too, like so much happened in that moment that it's hard like in the moment, I didn't realize everything that was happening. It wasn't until a little bit afterwards that I looked back and I was like, oh, now it makes sense. Right. But what I did know in that moment was one moment I had all this stuff, right? My pain level was a 10. I couldn't walk upright. The next moment I had no pain and I was walking normal. The day before my experience, I tried to take my kids paddleboarding and I couldn't even stand up on a paddleboard. I drove back to Portland and I paddleboarded across the Columbia River and back. Right. So I knew something had changed. Right. And then I also knew all this other stuff. Right. Like through that experience, I found I could just focus my intention on others and they've been able to heal instantly a lot of times as well, or
I've
miraculously, or
watched it.
whatever you want to call
I've watched it. It's amazing.
it. Yeah. Yeah. It did take me. So right after that, I still sought validation for an experience that I had just had.
Mm.
I knew my experience was instant. But when I immersed myself, let's say, in the energy world, I didn't come across many people that had instant healing experiences. Most of their experiences were over time, right? So I kind of went back a little bit and had to work myself through all of what everybody else was doing. Right. So in the beginning, when I was helping people, and we talked about this yesterday, is I would go back in time and start to clear up stuff so that they could have an experience in the moment. But what I was really doing was creating enough amplitude in the moment so they could have a greater experience than what they were having. And that's really what healing is. Healing is just a greater experience than the experience before. And since time isn't a constant, each moment we have the opportunity to have a greater experience. Like we don't have to wait till the next day or the next month or the next year, right? Each moment, perfection exists. Like in between each moment in time. So if like this is the last moment and this is the next moment, in between those two moments is perfection. So now when I'm helping people heal, I'm just getting in between the moments and silently encouraging them to get there. And then sometimes pointing out to them, hey, you just had a moment.
And like I've seen you, like you're like, hey, you just had a moment, like get up and go walk around and see what that feels like.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. And so they get up and they walk around and you can hear them and they're like, oh my gosh, I,
Yeah.
my shoulders are straight. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting up.
Yeah.
And they don't even notice until they start to move. They start to walk
Yeah.
around and then they're like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, there are times where before I can even ask, they'll say, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I'm totally better. But sometimes you have to point out to them that they're better because they're still stuck in the last moment. Right. And really, anytime we're outside of perfection, we're either stuck in the past or in the future because perfection is the present moment. Right. Pain is outside of the present moment. And pain is just an experience. It's not really ours. We just don't think we have a choice to overcome it because for whatever reason, we can't grasp that it's all accounted for. Right? So we just choose to continue to participate in the past.
It's all in the mind. And I love that example you gave me of the girl with, was it multiple personalities?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Um, I think I was saying, yeah, cancer should be one of the easiest ones, right, to shift because really cancer is just a group of cells that is no longer participating in the, say, the consciousness of the person. Right? It feels separated, and the only way that it can survive is to be cancerous. But there was a woman in 1986 in Europe that had cancer and multiple personalities, but she only had cancer in one personality. Like as soon as her personality shifted, they could MRI her and it was no longer there. So that just goes to show how quickly, or not even quickly, how instantly things can change, and that it is perception. Right? But our minds operate, let's say, in cause and effect. Our hearts cause and effect. Or our minds are trying to think ourselves better. Our heart is already better. Right? Our hearts are our perfected self.
Mm.
And our minds are trying to think ourselves there. And you really can't think yourself there. You just have to be there.
Mm.
So, and that's one of the reasons why it's so much easier when somebody else is participating in your healing experience, because they can hold the space even when you don't think it's possible. And they don't know all your stories. The reason we can't think ourselves better is because we know everything that we have done. Right? Just like if you walk off the sidewalk and you twist your ankle, you know that you stepped off the sidewalk. And in that moment, it's hard to grasp that even if you, let's say that the sidewalk is a mistake, or you think that it's a mistake. You think that you have to then continue in that experience because of the mistake that you made. When really, once anything happens, the next moment it can be something totally different. Like unlimited second chances. Right? You step off the sidewalk and you break your ankle, the next moment your ankle can be perfect. As long as you're willing to let go of blaming yourself for stepping off the sidewalk.
Why do you think we get so stuck? I mean, what do you think contributes to us not being able to believe that?
I don't, because we don't feel we have a choice. Because it's been beat into us that time is the most important thing. And that perfection isn't something that can happen here. That we
Mm.
won't be perfected until some other point.
Mm.
It's almost like the difference between allowing the let's say somebody breaks their ankle, right? If they just forget about it and just allow the process to play out, it might take 6 weeks for that bone to heal. When really, if they truly let it go, they don't even have to participate in that time frame. They could just have a healed ankle. But again, most of us have already been told that bones take 6 weeks to heal. So everybody's living as if it's a 6 week time frame when it can be instant. I've helped people with broken bones that no longer had broken bones. Right? Again, it's much harder. If I were to break my ankle and I had to sit around and focus on healing my ankle, it might be hard for me on my own to step outside of time. Whereas if somebody else is helping, it's easier to get outside of time.
So it helps for us to, or we need each other.
Well, if we didn't need each other, I'm sure there's enough worlds out there that we could all have our own little planet somewhere. Really, life is about people helping people, because we always need examples. I mean, the Bible's full of examples. Books are full of examples. Right? And really, the example is it just needs to be something greater than what you're being in the moment.
Mm.
Like some people might even think they can't help people when everybody can help somebody. And all it takes is a moment of getting outside of everything that has happened and be willing to help somebody else. And it's like, for me, I've already experienced enough pain to know that I don't want others to experience pain. And so in the beginning, I might want to feel what your pain felt like, because I would have thought, oh, I need to feel it in order to help you. But that was the same thing I was doing before my, let's say, healing experience. I was feeling everybody's pain. Now, if you say that I have a migraine, I just know that's your truth. But it isn't the ultimate truth, because the ultimate truth is that you don't need to have a migraine.
Mm.
So instead of feeling it, because if you say, okay, I'm in pain, and then I feel it, then there's two people in pain. And then it's much harder to overcome. If you say I'm in pain, I know that you don't need to be in pain. And I hold that knowing until you realize that that is the truth. That what you were experiencing was just an experience, and it has nothing to do with you. Like anything outside of perfection isn't really ours. It's just an experience that we're having because we don't think we have a choice. And it's pretty simple to help people out of those experiences because they aren't really real. Right. And I don't necessarily even call myself a healer. I just say that I'm just an example of possibility for people, because we're really our own healer. And I don't want to put myself in a position to be healing people, because that's kind of what I was doing before. Now I want to see everybody is already healed. I just need to point out to them that they're much better than what they thought.
I think that's why I was so drawn to you, because it wasn't the Mikael Luman show. It wasn't about you. You made it about every person who's in the room,
Yeah.
every person who is there. Um, and it wasn't about you getting the glory. It was about you saying, "Hey, I just realized this and I want to share it with you."
Yeah. Well, the old me might have wanted all the glory, but the old me was in serious pain because of the glory.
And you're not that guy anymore.
Right. And it doesn't do any good to take on people's pain. It either has to be transmuted or released, however you want to look at it. Right. But it doesn't need to continue to be what it is. And I think love is the activator.
Mm.
Like love is the ultimate truth. Right. And like compassion and gratitude and all those things. So even if my life is not going great, I can still get out of that and help somebody have a healing experience. And when I do, I actually benefit just as much as the other person does.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Like, I feel kind of selfish for the work that I do because I get so much out of it. I
Yeah.
haven't had one client that I've had that didn't change my life.
Yeah.
Not one client that I've had that wasn't just like, oh, like this huge understanding and knowing just from my experience with them.
Yeah.
Uh, and it just it keeps multiplying. I did have a question. Have you noticed that it's easier to help people with physical pain versus emotional pain?
Well, I think it's all the same,
Okay.
but it's easier to show somebody a physical change than it is to show them an emotional change.
Yeah.
If somebody says I'm depressed, And let's say that I get out of my head and into my heart, and I get them into their heart. The next moment, they have to start being in their heart. So if you say I'm sad, and then the next moment you're not sad, you then have to go and do not sad things. Because you need to convince yourself that you're something other than what you were the moment before. Most people, I won't say people sometimes don't act in faith and do not sad things. Right? Even if you said, I'm super sad, and I let's say I focus on you, and I'm like, okay, how do you feel now? And you're like, oh my gosh, I feel great. The next moment, then you have to do great things to know that you're great. If you sat there for 30 minutes, you might start to convince yourself that you must not have felt great. Whereas something physical, let's say you say, I can't walk up and down the stairs. As soon as you walk up and down 10 steps, you know that you can do it. So it's much easier to hold on to that knowing because you just had an experience that was opposite of what you thought. Sometimes one step isn't enough for somebody to continue to walk up and down the stairs. 10 steps is. Like the person that says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, that is their truth. As soon as they do, they have to then continue to walk up and down the stairs. Or they might convince people they didn't do it. And there are times when somebody will say that, I'll focus on them, they do it, and then the next day they'll try and tell me that they never did it. Because it wasn't enough for them to let go of everything that was associated with walking up and down the stairs. So in order for healing to be instant, the present moment has to be greater than their perception of the past or their fears of the past or what they missed out on in the past. Right? So, and we were talking about this yesterday. If somebody says, I can't do this, and then they can, if they get to the bottom and then they start to tell you all the reasons or all the things they missed out on, not being able to walk up and down the stairs, they sometimes go back. When the present moment is great enough, they don't care that they missed out on anything because now they can walk up and down the stairs. Just like I told you yesterday, like I've helped a bunch of people with POTS, which is a pulmonary disorder where you can't stand up for more than 30 seconds because your blood pressure spikes and your heart rate goes to 200. 35 seconds wasn't enough for the story to shift. 2 minutes, and they never sat back down. Because why would they sit back down when they've stood up for 2 minutes? They thought 30 seconds was the truth. 2 minutes and 30 seconds are so far apart, they choose to stand up and to not sit back down.
It's absolutely amazing. And honestly, one of the things that I've talked to my clients about is at the very end of the program is I say, okay, now we need to think about what it's like to be well, and I should start my system with that. Yeah. But because what they do is they get to the end and they're like, oh, I've been mentally ill and physically ill my whole life. Who am I? It's like they go through an identity crisis. Yeah. Like, who am I? If I'm not sick, if I can walk, if I'm not mentally ill, if I can work and I can think and I can do things, who am I?
Yeah. Well, and the doing is not as important as the being. You have to be first, and then so everything that you do after that is from a place of being, a place of health, a place of wealth, or well-being or whatever that is, then your actions are acting in faith as if you are a healed person. I say this, like, it's a heart set more than a mindset.
Mm, man, is that true?
Like, it's a knowing. Right? So the head thinks, the heart knows. It's hard to explain the heart with the language that we have. When we're trying to explain things, we're usually explaining from our heads, not our hearts, because our hearts is a being. The head is thinking. So I sometimes say, when my healing experience, not only did I change physically, but I had a change of heart. And not that my heart changed, just my awareness of, or the knowing of my heart changed. The moment before, I wasn't heart-centered, let's say, or heart-driven, or purpose-driven, right? The next moment, I had an opportunity to then live from my heart. Like, my head was thinking I was helping people. My heart knew I wasn't helping people. The next moment, I was able to do it differently, coming from my heart and not my head.
Do you have any origin story of your own of what was different on that hill? Or was it a hill? It was a river.
It was a river.
A river. But you said you walked up that.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any story that you tell yourself of why that moment was different compared to all the other moments before that you were in pain?
Well, part of it is I was out of options. So I didn't necessarily go there intentionally to heal myself. But had I gone there to heal myself, it would have been much different. I went there to surrender everything and had a greater experience. And I already knew that I could put energy in rocks because I'd already had started doing things, let's say, energetically, but really like physical energetically. Like, I was working with athletes and making patches that were programmed with frequencies. And I could show them that their performance would increase, let's say, 15 to 30%. And I also then got to the point, like, with my mom. So in the beginning, things were really physical. Like, I had to put the specific frequency into a patch. But with my mom one time, I actually had a bottle that was programmed with these frequencies that I would put on these patches. My mom, without the patch, could do 1 push-up. With the patches, she could do 3. And then one day I just decided, instead of putting the patch on her, to just hold the bottle and focus on her. When I was holding the bottle, she was able to do the 3 as if she had the patch on. Right? So I started to kind of detach myself from the physical a little bit before that. But again, I was not in a position for it to work for me because I still knew all my stories, or I still knew all my past. I could help other people have an experience, but I really wasn't willing to help myself yet. So when I went out of town, I knew I could program a rock, but I didn't necessarily go there thinking that I was going to put all my pain in a rock. I just went out of town because I felt as if I was out of options and I didn't know what I was going to do. Again, had I known, it might not have happened that way. Right? I was at rock bottom, let's say. So anything that happened was the greater experience. In that moment, I just was willing to let it all go. But in that moment, I found purpose. And I understood that any moment people choose to do something different is rock bottom. And any moment we can let it all go in order to have a greater experience. And really, it's just about choice.
Mm. And you were able to unpack that moment, I'm sure, over the next weeks, months, years.
Well, and also, had I just had my experience and not helped other people, I might have forgotten my experience by now.
Mm,
Right? Like you can't take the miracle and then not share it with others.
wow.
Right? Because I would have then been the same person I was before the experience. Right. So if I look back now, let's say what's been 7 years now, if I look back 7 years, I'll sometimes I can sometimes question, gosh, did it really happen that way? Like, was it really that bad? Was the MRA really real? Was I really in that much pain? But then I have hundreds of experiences with people that experience the same shift, the same thing. So I still know that it's true. I've had a blind woman whose vision came back. I had another woman who was in a wheelchair for 11 years that just stood up and walked. I had another woman that was 60 and she was down to 3 foods she can eat. Now she eats everything. I mean, I actually, sometimes when I go back and I think of all these things, it's, again, it's hard to grasp. If I hyper focus on them, I might start questioning it again. But I know that it happened. I experienced it. Like I had a woman whose ab muscles were 5 inches apart after giving birth. And the next moment, they were all the way back together.
Mm. And the one I watched was the woman with scoliosis, and
Yeah.
her shoulders were different levels, and
Yeah.
she wasn't able to sit, you know, like backwards.
Yeah.
And then you see through the process of like less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then she's like getting her husband to come in from the other room. And she was like, "Does my back look different?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah. Yeah. And, some of the most amazing ones I don't even have on video. Because I don't know. I mean, and I haven't, the videos are older. I don't necessarily film all the time now where I should, but it just, yeah.
And it's, they say seeing is believing, and that's
They do
hard.
say seeing means believing. That's why that acting in faith is the knowing. Like I would say experience is like seeing is not necessarily enough, but experiencing it is.
Mm. And honestly, knowing is the knowing.
Yeah.
there is there is no reproducing that.
Yeah.
You just know.
Yeah. And that's why it's important for somebody to recognize that they had an experience.
Mm.
Right. So the woman that couldn't eat food, okay, I focused on her. I said, okay, go make something that you haven't been able to eat in the past. She made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She took a bite and realized her stomach was better. Her stomach had been better for 5 minutes, or her stomach was always better. The bite is just what allowed her to know that it was better. So, had she not taken the bite, she wouldn't have activated that knowing. So, the thinking before that was that she couldn't eat food. There has to be an acting in faith that gets you out of your head and into your heart. The making the sandwich was that acting in faith. And then she took the bite and knew it, that her stomach was better. If the head is a circle and the heart is a circle, they don't ever quite cross. The way to get from the head to the heart is that moment of acting in faith.
Oh,
And it doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing. It just is that acting in faith is the shift in perspective from the thinking to the knowing. Energetically, let's say, if you're just always thinking, the energy is stuck in your head. To activate that into the knowing, you have to know that you've thought enough and then have the experience. It's like if somebody's standing on a cliff and wants to jump into the water, let's say it's 30 feet, right? To the point to where they have to think about it. Like one foot, you don't think about it, you just jump. 30 feet, you think about it, right? Have you ever tried to convince somebody to jump standing next to them? It's really difficult because you're both thinking about how to get the person into the water. What can you say to get them to jump? Right? And they struggle. They go back and forth. They walk to the edge, they walk back. They walk to the edge, they walk back. That's the energy stuck in the head. Right? And it gains momentum. Usually, if they don't jump within the first 30 to 60 seconds, they're not going to convince themselves to jump. Right? It's much easier if you jump into the water and then encourage them to jump. But the moment they step off the edge is the moment that they're in the water, even though they're not there yet. That's the acting in faith. The cliff is the head, the water's the heart, and everything in between is the acting in faith. Because at that point, it doesn't necessarily matter because you will get there.
at that point, it's a matter of gravity. It's a matter of natural law.
Yeah.
Once you jump, it's already done.
Right.
So once you get out of your head and jump towards the knowing in your heart with that act of faith,
yeah,
it's done.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so incredible. And I could literally talk to you for hours. But I want people to get to know you, and to get to work with you, and to get to learn from you, because you also teach other people to do this, correct?
Yeah, I do.
That's
I do.
amazing.
Yeah. It's so much easier than what we think. Healing is simple. Everything that we've learned has made it sound like it's an extremely difficult thing. It should be the easiest of things because it is just a return to ourselves.
Mm.
Like we're not creating healing for people. We're just showing people who they truly are. The reason that it's instant is because it's already happened, is because it's already present. Like in the beginning, I thought I was doing all this stuff, right? Like I would use my hands and I would push energy and pull energy and like do all this, like this energy exchange with people, right? Because I hadn't quite gotten to the space where I just knew that I could help them, right? But as soon as you start to see everybody as already perfected, it is so much easier to show somebody because you're not trying to fix them. You're just holding harmony until they become present of harmony or balance. And there's really not illness, there's just a little bit of disharmony. People say it all the time, like disease is just uneasiness. So it's simple to come back into harmony because that's our true state of being. Right? So when I'm teaching people, it's more about what we're doing and being than it is about a system. It's just practice getting present and helping people get present.
I love it. I love it. And I think that was one of the reasons I just couldn't wait to talk to you, because just watching some of your videos, I'm just like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
He's doing nothing.
Yeah.
He's
And doing
just
that.
he's just looking at them.
Yeah.
He's literally he's sitting there.
Yeah. And the videos, I mean, if I wasn't on video, I probably wouldn't even say that much.
Yeah.
Right. If some of the greatest experiences I've had with people, I'll be driving in the car and focus on them. And it happens. If I'm hyper, like again, it's just about being present. If I'm driving, I'm a little bit distracted from overthinking it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just like if there's times, let's say you say, my pain level's a 10, and I focus on you, and then you say, oh, it's still a 10. It's still a 10. Right? The more I start thinking about why, the less I'm present in my heart. I've done it enough now to know that I just have to maintain that space. And eventually you will recognize that it's something different than that. The moment you recognize that it's different than what you thought it was, is then the moment that it goes away. And sometimes people need a few reminders, because perfection is opposite of where they've lived. Right? That's why I have my class, and I also have like a healing group that meets 3 days a week, where people can just come and be present and have greater experiences. Because eventually they then start to recognize, oh yes, this is me. I can do this anytime.
That's amazing. So how do people get in your healing group?
Um, they can join from my Facebook or from my website. My website's mikaeldluman.com. So it's MikaelDluman.com. Or they can just message me on Facebook and I can give them all the information.
That's incredible. Absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for not keeping this to yourself, and for sharing this with me and with everyone. Um, and it sounds like it had to be that way because you would have lost it if you hadn't given it away.
Yeah.
Um, but
I mean, I want to help as many people as, I mean, that's really my purpose, is to just help as many people as possible. And really just to show people what we're capable of. And it's not just healing, it's everything. Right? We've limited ourselves thinking that we can't do everything, when really we are everything.
there's infinite possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, I think I told you yesterday, like right after my healing experience, I was so in tune. Right? Like I could charge my cell phone in my hand. I could bend a spoon. I could spin spinners. I could put a book in my hand and just know what was in the book. Right? But we are capable of way more than we allow ourselves. And all that stuff is fun practice to then just know that you can get into that space.
Absolutely. Well, anything that you would like to leave everyone with before we end?
I mean, I'm sure I could come up with a lot of things, but I mean, the one thing is just, it really doesn't matter what something is, because the next moment it can be something totally different. And it doesn't matter what somebody thinks that they have. because anything outside of perfection isn't really theirs.
Mm.
Right? Whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, it's all the same thing. Right? We don't have to continue to live in cause and effect. Right? Miracles don't care what you've done. Second chances don't care what you've done. It only matters what happens in this present moment and then moving forward. And moving forward doesn't even matter as much, except for moving forward, you will hold yourself accountable for those choices. Just like I had a woman that was heavier than she wanted to be. I focused on her. She got on the scale. She was 5 pounds lighter. But then she had to then make choices that aligned with that being 5 pounds lighter, because had she then chose to eat, let's say, chocolate cake, she might not have held on to it because she would have blamed herself again.
Mm.
Each moment we have the opportunity to be perfect, as long as we let go of all the things that we're holding on to that keep us from perfection.
Amazing. Michael, thank you so much. I am so excited to learn more from you. And I believe that the best is yet to come as we continue to bring this ultimate truth to people.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Bye.
Okay.